Welcome everyone to day 4 of CaraConference. For those of you who are joining us for the second, third, or fourth time this week, thanks for coming back. And to those who are new, welcome to today's presentation. CaraCol is Greater Cincinnati's HIV/AIDS service organization, and we are so thrilled to be able to offer this content to you this week. My name is Megan Green, and I will be the moderator of today's presentation. So welcome. Before we get started, I do want to go over a few housekeeping items. The first of which is today is an educational experience, and if you want to share what you've learned today on your social accounts, please do so. You can tag us at We Are CaraCol. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and you can also use the hashtag CaraCom. If you experience any technical difficulties today, please make sure that you put that in the chat function. And we're just going to reserve chat today for technical difficulties. So hopefully no one has to use that item today. And if you're using a desktop or a laptop computer, that chat function can be seen right down here at the bottom of your screen. In turn, if you have any questions for today's presenters, you can utilize the Q&A box, also found at the bottom part of your screen. If you're joining from a mobile device today, things are going to look a little bit different. That chat button will be found at the bottom right hand of your screen, clicking that More button right there and then Chat. And the Q&A button will be found at the top right corner of your screen right here. Make sure you don't press that Leave button. Today's conference and this week's conference wouldn't be possible without some great folks. And so we want to send a thank you to our presenting partner, Maytech, the Midwest AIDS Training and Education Center, to our conference sponsors, Gilead Sciences and Thera Technologies, and to our conference supporter, Grace Hospice. Today in particular, we do want to give a special thanks to Gilead Sciences. Gilead Sciences is a research-based biopharmaceutical company whose mission is to discover, develop, and deliver innovative therapeutics for people with life-threatening diseases. Gilead seeks to improve the care of millions of patients living around the world, including regions where access to medication is limited or does not yet exist. So thank you, Gilead. Lastly, after today's webinar, you will receive a link to a survey. We ask that you fill this out, let us know how we did and what we can do better for next year. If you are looking for those continuing education credits, you will have to fill these out. It is a mandatory part of getting those credits. Lastly, before I introduce our introducer, today's webinar will be recorded and slides will be sent with that recording early next week. Now to introduce today's speakers, I want to introduce Ashley Clonchmore from Maytech.
Thanks, Megan. Welcome, everyone. I have the pleasure of introducing today's speakers. John Coco is the Director of Reentry Services at Step Up. He has worked in mental health and substance use disorders since 2007. He originally joined Step Up in 2011 as the Case Manager for Reentry Services Program. He received his Master's in Social Work in 2014, specializing in mental health and substance use disorders. He left Step Up the same year to begin his doctoral education in social work. He completed his coursework and returned to Step Up in 2017. He is an active member of the Marion County Reentry Coalition, is a CSWE Fellow, and sits on the Board of Directors for the National Organization of Forensic Social Work. After completing her undergrad at the University of Dayton in 2015, Abby Abram began her career in the field of public health while serving a year with AIDS United AmeriCorps. She further pursued this passion by completing her master's in public health at the University of Indianapolis and began her career at Step Up, Inc. As the Indiana Peer Education Program Project Coordinator, Abby is passionate about reducing health disparities and instilling hope in the Indiana Department of Corrections. So thank you so much for presenting today, and if you would like to share your screen, that would be great. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. Sorry about that. I went to hit the little space bar for uh, to unmute myself, and I had selected my PowerPoint slide. So we got that one out of the way. We got, everybody gets one this day and age. So we're moving on from there. But thank you very much, Ashley, for the very kind introduction. Yes, my name is John Coco. I'm the Director of Reentry Services, Step Up Incorporated. I'm joined by my colleague, Abby Abram, who will be presenting with me today. And we're here to present about a really innovative project that we're very proud of called the Indiana Peer Education Program. The motto is prison health is community health. And, as we're having these public conversations about the importance of corrections and the, really key insight it gives into some of the disparities faced by people in our community, whether that's concerning poverty, race, LGBTQ populations, these kind of things. There's emerging conversations about how we can improve health outcomes in those communities as well. And I think that we've really stumbled on something pretty great. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Abby, and she's going to provide a little bit of background about why we chose this topic.
Yeah, hi, thank you, John, and thank you, Megan and Ashley, for the introductions. Like John said, I work at Step Up as well, and I'm really excited to be here and talk about our program. We love INPEP and can talk about it all day. So I want to start by just giving you a little introduction, as John was saying, about the population that we serve. So we know that the U.S. has about 5% of the world's population, but in turn, they have 25% of the world's incarcerated population. So we have a lot of people here in the United States that are incarcerated, which is why this is such a target population for our program. Thanks, John. We're going to go into some of the health disparities that we see within this population that we serve, but we just want to point out that about half of those who are living in incarceration are living with some mental health disorder. That could be something from prior to being incarcerated. You know that there also is a lot of trauma that comes along with being incarcerated. So a lot of that also occurs just from being incarcerated in itself. Additionally, 1 in 5 people who are incarcerated in the US have a drug-related offense. In Indiana specifically, so where our program is housed, here is a little demographic information about the population that we're serving. So we know there's about 61% of our population in Indiana Department of Correction that's white, about 33.8% Black, 4% or so is Hispanic, and that is shows just the different populations that we're serving within the facilities. So as John said, we know that within this population, there are a lot of health disparities that are experienced by people who are incarcerated. And the real zinger that kind of brought INPEP or the peer education program to fruition was what we were seeing in hepatitis C. So as I said earlier, we have a large percent of our population that's incarcerated, about 25% in the US, and 13% of people incarcerated in Indiana are infected with hepatitis C. And this number is based on those going into the facility. So about 13% of people, there is testing done on the way into the facility, so that doesn't necessarily capture anyone that is being infected with hepatitis C while incarcerated. So again, this population is disproportionately, especially when compared to the general population, where we see much lower percents of HCV infection. We know that this is a target population for strategies such as INPEP. And another thing that's been helpful with us getting this program off the ground and really the push for treatment within the facilities, because treatment can be completed in just a few weeks. We know that people who are incarcerated may be there much longer than that. So in 2008, a federal ruling stated that it was against the 8th Amendment to deny treatment, which means that people hopefully are starting to get this treatment while they're incarcerated. And we've seen that with some of our peer educators as well.
Yeah, some other health disparities that we've discovered and that are present in the literature around the correctional populations are mental health disorders. As Abby explained earlier, there's a higher than typical rate, or at least a higher rate than seen in the general public, of mental health disorders and substance use disorders in the incarcerated population. Obesity is an issue. I think that anybody who spends any time speaking with someone who's been incarcerated will hear stories about the type of nutrition they're able to receive while incarcerated. So often the meals we got to see during our 40-hour training that we're talking about here in a minute, the food that the peer educators would receive during those trainings, and a lot of bread, there's a lot of salt and carbs and fats, and there was an ongoing conversation among the peers about how to eat healthy and get the nutrition you need. So obesity is certainly an issue. Infectious diseases, obviously, Hep C is a big one. Just due to the virulence of HC virus, there's a higher than typical rate of transmission in correctional settings. But other infectious diseases like HIV and things like that are very much a concern and very much a focus of INPEP as well. And then finally, different types of cancers are represented among the population at a higher rate than is seen in the community. So our program is actually a replication of the New Mexico Peer Education Project. We kind of stand on their shoulders. That they were the ones that really did a lot of the heavy lifting, and it's been present in New Mexico correctional facilities for about 12 years now. Essentially, they saw the same issues that we're seeing here in Indiana, so that there was a higher rate of these diseases and health concerns and infections in their prison population. And they saw that, especially with the advent of effective treatments for Hep C, that there was really an opportunity to address those concerns while people were incarcerated. So not only provide treatment, hopefully, or steer people to treatment while they're incarcerated, but also provide concrete evidence-based information and education to the people to reduce their risk going forward. So beginning in the fall of 2018, we began to collaborate with the New Mexico. New Mexico Peer Education Program is an offshoot of Project ECHO, which is contained within the University of New Mexico School of Medicine. And we're going to get into the ECHO model here in a little bit, but sort of a little branch of a branch off of there is the New Mexico Peer Education Project. But they've been extremely generous with their time, their guidance, the technical assistance. We were able, you see here, these are members of the Indiana team and some other people from Department of Correction in Tennessee and things like that, meeting with the New Mexico Peer Education Program team. And what's important about that is that 3 of the 4 staff, and I don't have the time to point them out here, but 3 of the 4 staff they have currently are former peer educators themselves. So these are people who were incarcerated in the New Mexico Department of Correction, who were peer educators while they're incarcerated, and who now work for the University of New Mexico and provide support for this program statewide. That's the other really cool part. We are very much in awe of the work that they've been doing. And so the New Mexico Peer Education Program is in every facility in the state, and New Mexico is very large. And they're also doing really cool things now on the community level. So we're trying to catch up as best we can. Presently, we're represented in 4 facilities. So we are at Correctional Industrial Facility in Pendleton, Indiana, Plainfield Correctional Facility in Plainfield, Indiana, Indiana Women's Prison, which is in Indianapolis here, and Pendleton Correctional Facility, which is a maximum security facility in Pendleton, Indiana as well. And you can kind of see, even from kind of the challenge that lies ahead, which is that there are many facilities scattered across the state of Indiana. I think by landmass, Indiana is slightly smaller than Ohio, but it's very long. It's very tall, so to speak. So we decided to focus locally. We are based in Indianapolis. Our partners with the State Department of Health and with the Indiana University Richard M. Fairbanks School of Public Health are all located here in Indianapolis, and taking such an ambitious project really required us to kind of think strategically. So we started at the women's prison. You can kind of see highlighted here, hopefully on your slide. Correctional, Industrial, Pendleton, and Plainfield are all within pretty easy driving distance of our offices here. Prior to COVID hitting, our plan was to expand pretty aggressively this year into 4 or 5 new facilities. Of course, like everywhere else, and likely I would imagine Ohio is in the same position. Our facilities are in lockdown, so right now we're not allowed to visit or do any of those trainings in person, which is really essential to the model, as I will now allow Abby to explain to you.
Abby, we're having a little bit of difficulty hearing you.
Is this better?
It is. Thanks so much.
I changed my audio thing. Okay, so that was my one mess up, like John had one mess up. So we're good. So as I was saying, the program has 4 main components, and I'll give you a brief overview here, and then we're going to dive a little deeper into what these components are. So the first is the 40-hour training. This is where we train our selected peers, which is how we refer to the people that are incarcerated that are kind of really running the show. This is where we train them to be peer health educators. The 10-hour workshop is then the workshops that those peers, the trained health educators, host within their facilities to train other members in the facility, so their peers within the facility, about the different health topics. So this is where they really do their education about how to prevent things like HIV, hepatitis C, and address things like substance use disorder, mental health disorders, and so on. Then we have our monthly site visits. This is where we go out to the facilities, and sometimes we spend this time auditing classes, making sure that our peer educators are sticking to the script, or sometimes we go answer questions, provide ongoing support. Really, we do that 40-hour training, but then these are essential to remind the peer educators that we are still with them throughout the process and to make sure that they feel supported in the work that they're doing. And then the last component is the TeleECHO, and this was what John started to mention, how this is kind of what makes it an ECHO program, but that's a little more detailed, so we'll get to that in a few slides. You can switch, John. Thank you. So here first you'll see one of our graduating classes of peer educators. So these men are from Plainfield Correctional Facility, and they were our second ever class to graduate in May of 2019. And obviously they're looking pretty proud, as they should be, because they've just completed 40 hours of pretty intensive training. So we, my team and I, including John, and as he mentioned, our partners at the State Department of Health and Richard M. Fairbanks School of Public Health, spend the entire week inside the facility. Our days start early, and we really put the men and women to the test. By the end of their first day of training, some of them didn't even know what they were doing when they came to the training, and by the end of the first day, they're giving a presentation about an STI. So we really throw them right into the work that they're going to be doing, which is why they should be so proud, because they're learning about things. In addition to the health topics, we do spend some time covering that, but we spend a lot more time talking about how to be a peer educator, motivational interviewing, stages of change, how you can walk through these things as you're teaching, and how you can really connect with your peers. Obviously, our peer educators are in a unique spot, as they automatically have the respect of their peers in a way that's different than if John or myself or someone else who isn't currently incarcerated would have going into one of these facilities. So then we just really train them and teach them how to use these skills and use that connection to motivate changes in their facility. We also cover some pretty academic topics, like we talk about adult learning theory and how you can implement this into every presentation that you give, as well as things like Aristotle's rhetoric and really getting to people's core of why they want to make these changes and using that to motivate how they work in the facility. So that's the 40-hour workshop. And once we leave after the 40-hour workshop, it's really our peer educators that are running the show. They are the boots on the ground. They are the ones that are making the change within their facility. And that's through these 10-hour trainings that they host within the facility. It varies from facility to facility how often the 10-hour trainings occur, but some facilities are doing multiple in a week. So that means these peer educators are up there talking about the topics listed here, for 10 hours as a team, really putting on a production. We train them to really work as a team. There's no leader. It's really, we ask everyone to think about what their skills are and work as a team to use their skills to best represent the program and connect with their peers during their presentations. For example, here you'll see some of the beautiful artwork. Of course, there's no PowerPoint or video or anything like that to help our peer educators in their training. So they spend hours and hours making these beautiful, very impressive visual aids. And we don't allow our peer educators to use cue cards. So these become the cue cards that our peer educators are using during their presentation. We, during our 40-hour workshop, kind of represent all of the things that we expect from our peer educators in our 10-hour workshops. So we also have really put our art skills to the test, making our own visual aids for our own presentation, which was a lot of fun. And it allows our peer educators to really get creative. There's, of course, topics that have to be covered, like how to wash your hands appropriately, what to do if you don't have soap, or how often should you be getting tested for things. And the peer educators really use creative methods to get this information across. We've seen skits, we've seen raps, we've seen songs. Our peer educators really embrace the information, but then turn it into a way that's pretty easily digested by their peers and fun, because 10 hours is a long time to be sitting and learning about some of these pretty heavy topics, but our peer educators do a great job of making it interactive and exciting for their classes. In our 10-hour workshops and in the INPEP program, we have what we call the 5 questions. So the 5 questions are really the backbone of the peer education program. Every topic that we cover, or every topic that our peers teach on, they follow this outline. So the first question, and you'll see in these examples that we're talking about hepatitis C. I'm not actually going to teach you about Hep C, but I'm going to explain how we use the questions. So every presentation, they're going to start out by talking about how do you get it? How could someone come in contact, or how could someone become infected with whatever communicable disease we're talking about? So in this case, hepatitis C. And we really feel that this is the best way to start, because people want to know, like, what is it, but how am I going to know to get if I have it? So that's our first question. And then our next question is, how do you know you have it? And our little cheat here is the answer is always to get tested. You may have symptoms with some of these diseases, and you may not have symptoms for a long time. So it's really important to emphasize getting tested, especially in a correctional facility where people may feel apprehensive about getting tested or have questions about getting tested. This is where our peer educators are really able to shine and use their experience. So some of our peer educators have made visual aids that are the medical request slip, and showing you exactly how to fill it out and what you can put on the request form, so that their peers feel comfortable going to get that help or going to determine if they are living with one of the diseases that they discuss. Then our next question, so our third question is, can it be treated or cured? Of course, we know that Hep C can be treated or cured. Again, there's a lot of myths in prison, and information gets spread easily. And I think that I was pretty surprised when we started doing our work how quickly things spread. So people might say, well, I heard actually that this, but our peer educators really stick to the facts. We focus on ensuring that we're only giving reputable information. If the information doesn't come from us, then we can't say it's true. So they're not using information that they get from the news. They're not using information that they get from friends or family on the outside. They're really getting information from our team, which we get from the State Department of Health, the World Health Organization, the CDC, and other similar reputable sources. At the end of last year, we were presenting at the Indiana Infectious Disease Conference, and we were able to have a panel of a few of our peer educators. So I'm going to play a brief clip from Marvell. He is a peer educator at Pendleton Correctional Facility, and he's going to talk a little bit about the myths in prison.
I think, yeah, absolutely, because before we were misinformed and we didn't know a lot of stuff, but now we have facts. We have, we busted a lot of myths, and now we have the actual information instead of guessing and hearing from other guys. We know we have facts, and we have our team we can always refer to and figure out the things that we don't know. So yeah, absolutely.
So that is, like I said, that's one of our peer educators, just kind of sharing with us how they can use the answers to these questions and the facts that they're given to really bust some of the myths that are prevalent in prison. Then our fourth question is, what can happen if you don't get it treated or cured? So of course we've figured out how you can get it, how you know you have it, but now maybe you're living with hepatitis C. So what happens if I don't go to medical, or what happens if I don't seek the treatment or cure that's available? And this is the next question in our outline. And then our last question is probably one of the most important, all about prevention. So either how can you prevent getting it or giving it to others? So either I know that I have it and I don't want to give it to someone else, or I found out that I don't. I've gotten tested and I'm not living with it and I don't want to get it. So we focus on the ABCs. It's a little acronym that we use for most of the diseases, and it's really meant to be a stair step. So of course, if you can abstain from an activity such as needle sharing, then we would promote that, but we also realize that that is not possible for everyone. So if you're not ready, or you're not at the point where you want to abstain or you're going to abstain, what can you do to try and stay healthy? And so that's where we move into being careful, be faithful. We talk about being faithful to one partner, or being faithful to only using your own items. And then last, you'll see a couple variations here from our peer educators, but we're really making a shift to make the C choose harm reduction. So, you might not be able to abstain, or you might not be able to be faithful just yet, but what can you do? What choices can you make to have the least harm possible? So maybe that's using first, or whatever it might be. We cover those options, and that again allows our peer educators to really meet their peers where they're at, instead of expecting that everyone could possibly abstain or is ready for different types of prevention. I'm going to play Brad, one of our peer educators, talking a little bit more about this. He is at the facility in Plainfield. I'm going to turn it up a little bit, so hopefully you can hear better.
Given the ABCs, abstain, be faithful to your stuff. Being healthy conscious is not necessarily a free-giving thing. There's a little selfishness involved in that. And once you get that out there, that you can't necessarily share all your personal belongings with people, and that being maybe a person's first step at combating back, along with several other things like washing your hands. And then your C, just being clean and consciously aware of these different situations and all.
Yeah, so again, this is really the last question in the outline, but really focusing on prevention and harm reduction. All right, I'm going to pass it over to you, John.
Thank you, Abby. I appreciate that. Before we move on, we just kind of covered a lot of territory pretty quickly. I want to see if Megan, if there are any questions that are coming through in the Q&A.
There are no questions right now in the Q&A. I think you guys are doing a fantastic job.
Thank you. For anybody who's attending here, I think we're very open to kind of answer questions as we go along. We're also going to make ourselves available afterwards. So if you have anything that doesn't get answered, we're really, as Abby said, we love talking about this. And I think that one of the things that's really cool is that by having those kind of two things, by having those 5 questions and by having really instilling a sense of ownership and autonomy in the peers, you really get some really interesting sort of products from that. So, you see, like Abby said, these raps, the artwork, the things like that. We can also see that instead of kind of having this prescribed like script, like you say this and this and this, it's more like, here's the information, here's this kind of knowledge base of how to present and the ways to handle these different situations. And then you move forward from there. And it becomes a much more engaging sort of experience for the people the peers are educating. So, and we hear that a lot from both the peers, the peer educators, from their peers, the other people who are incarcerated in the facilities, and from staff. We've heard so many times from staff that like, we've never seen anything like this. And we're not necessarily bragging about it. I am proud. But I think everybody can help to be in working with this. But I think more than that, it's if we're looking at people having to really own the information and really kind of absorb it in a meaningful way. We know this about any type of education. This is a model that really does break things down in a way and present information to people that they can then absorb, retain, and implement in their life going forward. So I think that's one of the exciting parts of this. And we're going to kind of get to some of the implications of that later on. But one of the ways that we continue to support the peers' autonomy and the work that they're doing, because we leave, right? After, and we make that very clear during the 40-hour training. We're teaching you a lot of stuff, and that's because it is very difficult for us to come and go from this facility. We go through, we get there about a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour early, because we have to go through security and have all our stuff examined, go through the x-ray machine. The first day of the training, we're bringing in these big plastic totes, and they have to go through the conveyor belt and get x-rayed and get searched through by the security and everything like that. It's really an ordeal, and so we're like, we can't be coming back. And the facility also isn't real keen on having this gaggle of facilitators coming and going all the time. But they have been very generous in sort of accepting. Not only does it have this 40-hour training component, and we've even gotten 3 of the 4 facilities to allow us to bring in Chipotle on the 4th day, which is really cool. And Chipotle because A, it's delicious. I love Chipotle. And B, because all of their stuff is plastic, which means it passes the security regulations. No metal or anything like that coming in. And the peers freak out. They love it because it's a real treat for them. But then we come back every month and we meet with them. In the past, we meet with them in person. Of course, now we're trying to implement, and we've successfully implemented some virtual monthly site visits. And really what that's to do is update information. So, it's amazing the amount of information that exists in prison, not only some of the myths that Marvell was speaking to, but also, they're watching news, they're talking to family on the phone, they're reading articles, they're doing these things. And so not only do our peers want clarity on some of the information they're getting, but also, they're getting tough questions from some of the people they're educating, right? And they don't know. And that leads to the second point, which is the parking lot. One of the things that we're very clear about in our instruction is if you don't know it, say you don't know it, right? There's no shame in acknowledging you don't know something. None of us know everything in the world. And that's a model that, the team, the facilitator team demonstrates. We're not afraid to say we don't know, but we're going to look it up, right? We're going to find out. We're going to go to these credible sources and come back to you. And so that's part of what the parking lot is for. Is it really, and it's incredible because I'm not sure if many of you on this call work in correctional facilities, but there is really a culture of pride, of like really, of having to kind of put up this front of who you are and to show that vulnerability of saying, I'm up here presenting and I don't know the answer to that, is a real hurdle and for some of the culture in correctional facilities. So we're always really proud when our peers are able to just kind of let go of that and own that. And so we honor that by anytime we have monthly site visits, they will bring their parking lot questions. So for example, during our most recent virtual site visit with our facilitators at the Indiana Women's Prison, they had been asked about, what is this about the guy who was cured of AIDS in Europe, right? And in his Berlin patient, pretty famous case, very exciting that someone was, did resolve their HIV infection through this pretty invasive process, right? And so fortunately we had, not only Abby and I on the call, but also the Fairview School of Public Health representative and 2 representatives from the State Department of Health, just to explain the nuances of that in a way that the peers could then take back to the person who asked that question and also contain it, going forward. So it's like, yes, there was this one incident, it's being studied, it's very exciting, but we're still a long way from being able to roll that out in a meaningful way and say we have a cure. And so to kind of pass that along to them is really important. Similarly, when COVID hit, we were still doing some virtual site visits early on before there's a lot of restriction in the facilities. And so, of course, we were providing them as much information as we could about COVID. And to be honest, the peers have taken that and run with it. I mean, that's basically a whole module within the 10-hour workshops, because some are allowed to be doing those workshops. And then they're also just having conversations with their peers in the dorms. They're kind of recognized as subject matter experts in their pods. And so people come to them and be like, hey, I read this thing, or hey, do you have any idea what's going on here? And so not only are they doing these 10-hour workshops, but they're also doing a lot of work back in the dorms, just spreading this health information, even providing some tips to people on hygiene and cleaning the pods. How do you clean surfaces well, those kind of things. We also address specific facility concerns. So one of the major issues we run into with our facilities is that they kind of, for the sake of prison logistics, because you have movement. So they live in their pods in different dorms, different buildings on the campus. And then they are generally teaching class in a central location. And the way that Indiana DOC operates is basically, I've got person A traveling from point 1 to point 2. And, but if you're replicating that across several different dorms, it get kind of complicated because you have a command center monitoring all that stuff. So some of these facilities want all of our peers to move to one dorm. So you can see like INPEP going to Education, right? And they're like, okay, that's going to be 12, 13 people traveling in a group from location A to location B. But then you run into some of the conflicts that would normally happen, which is if someone's lived in another dorm for a period of time, they feel comfortable there, they've got their room set up the way they want, they're kind of cool with the people, who live around them, picking up and moving somewhere else can be a real hassle, and they don't want to do that. And then we can kind of coach them when they bring that to the monthly site visit on like, okay, how do you negotiate with the facility liaisons about this? How do you bring up your concerns in a way that is going to be heard? And then how do you make, the choice if the facility, because, they are incarcerated, they have very little power or influence over that decision. And so, how do you then take the next step? What is the follow-up decision to that? These kind of things. And then we've had some tough conversations, but we've also had some successful conversations, where they've really been able to take what they've learned and run with it and have a positive result. And then finally meet with the site liaison. So at each facility, we have one appointed staff member who is our liaison there. And this really could not run without them. They are, very supportive. We've been fortunate to have several of them be able to kind of either attend in person or listen in during the 40-hour training. And that's really resulted in a lot of buy-in on their part. They really believe in the model and they believe in what they're doing. They see the change in the peers that we're going to discuss here a little later on. And so they're the people who are signing our gate releases. Gate release is what, if we're bringing in pads of paper or pens or markers or things like that, we have to have that approved by someone at the facility, and they're the ones that do that. They're the ones who allow for email communication with us. They're the ones who are setting up the virtual site visits and navigating our tech carts to make sure that we can see our peers and hear them all right, and they can see and hear us. So really without them, we couldn't do it. And we're very grateful to our site liaisons. And so just meeting with them, seeing what their concerns are, seeing what they're seeing, because they get to kind of listen in or observe as the peers are doing the 10-hour workshops or doing some of the prep work around. And they're able to kind of let us know about, well, honestly, the group's a little frustrated with so-and-so, they're really, because they're glad to see us. We're the visitors, right? We were coming in. And so the site liaison kind of becomes, kind of fades in the background after a while. And can be like, well, they were pretty frustrated with so-and-so last week, and we kind of had to have a conversation. And that's important information for us to then bring up and to kind of, or bring up in a supportive way or one-on-one, and to kind of see like, okay, what's kind of going on here? How do we keep that group cohesion? So really the site liaisons are a huge part of this, and we're very grateful to them for everything they do. And we show that appreciation in non-COVID times by taking them out to lunch every once in a while. And then we have the monthly TeleECHO video conferences, and this is where we kind of begin to explain what ECHO is broadly. I apologize if some of you are hopefully involved in an ECHO. If not, I think that it'd be really worth your while to check out what an ECHO is, but we're gonna kind of summarize it here. So in a nutshell, the ECHO model was developed because people need access, easier access to specialty care. So I know probably everybody on this call has or will be referred to a specialist at some point in their life, be that, for bone issues, right? ENT stuff. I have a terrible, nose situation due to an old rugby injury. So I've been to ENTs and things, all that stuff. We need that specialty care. So, and there simply aren't enough specialists. We've probably also all had the experience of like, well, sure, you can see that specialist in 3 or 4 months, right? It's going to be a while for you to get in. So what Project ECHO does is it uses a team of specialists to train primary care clinicians remotely. And this was brought up in New Mexico, or kind of an invention that came about in New Mexico, because New Mexico is very vast and has huge hours-long drives in between resources, and then also has primary care physicians located in these rural communities. But in order to get them the training they need, they would have to drive hours, right? Hours each way. And that's going to take them out of their communities, not able to provide the primary care they are already providing, and let alone inhibit them from getting this specialty training they need. So it uses Zoom. Actually, we were all trained on Zoom before this happened, thank God, because it makes this a lot easier. But not that my lead-in would tell you that, but I am pretty good at using Zoom at this point. But it teaches that it allows a hub of specialists to sort of train these spokes of learners on a variety of topics. So that can, started with hepatitis C, to be honest, but now there's oncology, cardiology, HIV has a dedicated ECHO, LGBTQ, sort of specialty. If you want to be a therapist working in the community, you want to be culturally sensitive. If you want to be an activist in the community, these kind of things. So they're training. It's a way to really amplify, the phrase they use is a force multiplier, right? So how can we take a small cadre of specialists or people with expertise in this field and use it to magnify that to really impact the community in a meaningful way? We implement that through doing this with our peers. So we have the incredible opportunity to have a monthly TeleECHO where we are the hub and our locations are the spokes. So I cannot think of another program that allows for multiple people at multiple correctional facilities to teleconference with each other. And I'll be honest, one of our facilities is not comfortable with it. We're being patient. we're letting, we're kind of not going to fight that fight right now, because they have security concerns. They're like, we spend a lot of time, energy, and money to inhibit communication between facilities because of different security concerns around violence or drug trade or gang issues, these kind of things. And we're just not comfortable having that level of conversation. The other 3 facilities, fortunately, are comfortable. At least they are willing to trust us and give it a try. And so that has allowed us to have, and so what happens is, much like the other TeleECHOs, where there's generally a didactic session where someone will present for about half an hour on a topic. As I said, back in the early spring, we did have an expert on COVID present on COVID, or at least someone who knew as much as we did up to that time present on COVID to them. And then after that, there's a case presentation or several where they bring in issues they've faced in class. So like, how do you handle a disruptive student, right? A disruptive person you're providing the workshop to? How do you cope with, or how do you advocate to have more soap on the dorms? And that was an issue kind of prior to COVID that they complained about a lot, that there seemed to be sort of a disconnect in supply chain between the amount of soap arriving at the facility and the amount of soap distributed to the population, and some of the issues around that, and what happens is, so one facility will present that case, and then that is spread to the rest of the facility. So to the other facilities, I should say. So Plainfield Correctional Facility will present a case that then Indiana Women's Prison or Correctional Industrial Facility will respond to. And it's done in a very structured way. It's not in any way shaming or judgmental or things like that. These are equals who are sharing their suggestions with each other. And we always allow them, as with all the other TeleECHOs, the spokes communicate first, and then the hub kind of weighs in. And to be honest, most of the time we don't really have much to add. We will support certain suggestions that were made. I'm sure that Abby remembers as well as I do the time that the Indiana Women's Prison gave an excellent response to the Plainfield peer educators who were being, on that particular day, maybe a little pessimistic about what they could and couldn't do. And the women were like, we got to do it. Just got to get in there, and having that sort of, not only didn't they provide some concrete resolutions for the group of Plainfield, but also there's kind of, it builds a camaraderie, sort of an esprit de corps between the facilities that, given the nature of correctional facilities, which are meant to be isolating and are meant to be disconnecting, can be really rejuvenating for them and keep them in this, because this is a really tough job. It requires a lot of thought, it requires a lot of preparation, and they do so well. You can just see the potential that exists, and that really helps when they have these monthly teleconferences. They can see other people at other facilities doing the same work they're doing, maybe in a different way, maybe in some better ways. It can really be inspiring and kind of a rising tide carries all boats type of situation. I think Abby and I will both be kind of chiming in here from now to the end of the presentation. We did want to bring up some of the challenges. So one of the big challenges we face in our population is trauma. I do a module, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, which in Indiana is the terminal license for a mental health professional with a degree in social work. I've worked in the field for 13 years, as Ashley noted in her very kind introduction. And so I did about an hour and a half presentation, sort of broadly speaking about mental health disorders. And the first time I did it, I was unprepared for the amount of questions I got regarding trauma and trauma symptoms. Some of our peer educators at that facility have been incarcerated for nearly as long, or actually in some cases longer than I've been alive. So it's been a lot of time in correctional facilities. and had seen a lot of violence. And it had been subject to violence in some cases. And so, you know, I was, and the literature bears this out too, that the rates of post-traumatic stress disorder and other trauma type disorders in correctional facilities are higher than the general population. Again, kind of echoing that mental health disparity that exists in correctional populations. But I think, and Abby might agree, that it was pretty stunning that first time we did the course, and I was able to sort of prepare and sort of tailor my presentations going forward to address that more directly, because I think that's something that not only do our peers cope with, not only trauma from the correctional setting, but trauma from prior to their incarceration, be that childhood or adulthood, these kind of things. But that's a really big issue that we address with our peers. Abby, did you have anything to add to that?
I was just going to say that just like bringing up the amount of trauma that was shared in that first like session that we talked about this, like almost brought me to tears right now. So like it's definitely a major component of the program, and we're really grateful to have John's expertise on that subject, and people like thrive on learning from John in that area. So yeah.
Thank you.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that it was, for if anybody on the call is a mental health provider or anything like that, it's kind of be jarring to go from, because I really do view the people in our as our peer educators as my peers. So I was going from educating my peers on a topic, much as I'm doing today, to having to switch almost into like my therapy mode, right, and kind of keep a neutral expression and be supportive and kind of get these things without unbundling their trauma too much. It was very it was really shocking, and yeah, Abby, I was also very moved that day as well. The other one is safety, not necessarily safety of us. I don't think that that's something that has been a big concern among the staff going in. I think that more so safety around feeling sort of safe to share, and also disclosure is a big one. So there's a lot of stigma that exists sometimes in facilities, and so having that sort of safety, to share, to be open, to be vulnerable is really key to this kind of work, but can be pretty tough. Abby, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I was just gonna also add something pretty unique about the program is that we don't have, in most of our classrooms, not all facilities, there is no guard or other staff. So the only people in the room are our peer educators and then the peers that they're training. And so although we've had no incidents, no problems with this, that's obviously kind of out of the norm again for being inside prison. We really promote that because it does allow for people to share more comfortably, have those more organic conversations that maybe couldn't occur if there was a staff person or a guard in there listening in. But of course, we are dealing with the facilities where their job is to maintain safety and order. And so there's definitely a balancing act there.
Yeah, and we even had some issue. One issue stands out where internal affairs, which is the segment of the staff at each facility who investigate the correctional population, the people who are incarcerated there, as well as other staff. So they're disliked on both sides, I suppose. Pulled one of our peers out, just kind of stopped him in the hallway. The guy was just walking back from the bathroom, brought him into another room and had him stripped naked to search him. And then didn't find anything, and then sent him back into our class. Well, he came into the class pretty upset, right? Humiliated, embarrassed. He was taking the class very seriously, and so he felt really, upset about missing part of the class, especially for that reason, et cetera, et cetera. And that kind of ties into the next piece here, which is sort of the culture that exists. A lot of what we espouse in our 40-hour training is in contrast to prison culture. I already talked about sort of the vulnerability piece, But I think also just caring, caring for each other, showing that regard. One of the things that we did pre-COVID, I'm sure we'll have to address this going forward, but we shake their hands. That's something that we were suggested not to do, but we do. And we call them by their what name they want to be called. We have them fill out nameplates in the first day of class, and they fill out the name, and it's like, that's what you want to be called? Okay. And sometimes we've had a couple of times where people will write something silly on the first day, right, just to kind of mess with us. They don't know who we are. And by the second day, they've sort of turned it inside out or flipped it around and written like the name they want to be called, because it's, kind of sadly so refreshing for them to be called that name, the name they want to be, as opposed to some staff call them offender so-and-so, if they want to be particularly harsh about it, and then some call them Mr., Mrs. so-and-so or Ms. so-and-so. But it's so nice to be like Abby. Hi, Abby, I'm John, right? And to be on that first name basis, the peers respond overwhelmingly to, and we hear a lot each training how important it is to go by that name. And then finally, one of the challenges we've run into is we lost some peers due to classroom trafficking. One of the agreements that we've had with the facility is they don't have to have a staff person, or they've agreed not to have a staff person in the class. And that's important because some of the risk factors we talk about are going on presently in correctional facilities: tattooing, IV needle sharing, sex, right? Fights, these kind of things. And if our peers are going to speak honestly to the people they're educating about the risks that are going on, and if the people they're educating are going to be comfortable enough to ask, is this thing I'm doing a risk? The problem with that is if a staff person's around, that staff person is compelled to report them. That is a write-up. And if you get write-ups, that can affect your classification. So if you get X number of write-ups or X type of write-ups, you can move to a higher security facility and lose some of the privileges you have. You can be, that can affect your transfer to a lower security facility, or even a modification to get placed on maybe community corrections. You get to go back home and finish your sentence with an ankle bracelet in the community. So, it's a really fraught thing. And so now we don't, fortunately our facilities agree to just kind of have the door open. So if a fight breaks out or things like that, they can hear it, but they're not necessarily hearing what's being said. But unfortunately, that's offered an opportunity for some of our peers to take advantage of that. We've made it clear from day one that we are not in any way expecting the facility to compromise their workspace at all, or the security of their facility at all. And so if any of our peers violate the rules, we will abide by whatever decision the facility makes regarding that peer's participation in the program. It's really sad. We've lost some people that we really liked and that were really valuable members of our team, but we felt that, there's consequences. And that's something we talk about a lot, is holding yourself accountable, taking responsibility. And we're also not under any impression, going back to the prison culture thing, that a 40-hour training or even this ongoing support is necessarily going to change someone's life to the point where they're going to stop doing what they were doing the day before they entered our 40-hour training, And even one of the New Mexico peers who now works for the New Mexico Peer Education Project will talk about how she was doing what she was doing for several years post becoming a peer educator. That was just kind of where she was at in life, what was important to her. And then eventually the importance of the peer education program and some of the other changes she wanted to make in her life led her to the decision that she had to kind of put away, doing some of the hustle, as they call it, that she had sort of, taken into her life. And so she stopped and didn't do that anymore. But for several years, she was doing it. And she was very open and honest about that. And we're realistic about that too.
John, before you continue, sorry to interrupt. It looks like we are at 1 o'clock. So want to let folks know that you and Abby are available to stay on a little bit after, and also remind folks that this is being recorded. So if you have to hop off now, that's fine. You'll get those recordings next week. But please feel free to continue your slides, and we do have a few questions when you're ready as well.
Okay. Yeah, we'll just kind of go through this quickly, and Abby, just like raise your hand or interrupt me. There's just a few more here, but one was space for workshops. So having adequate space and comfortable space to have our classes. That's been an ongoing conversation with some of the facilities. They'll have a nice classroom, and they'll get moved, and we'll have to go in and kind of advocate to get them moved back or moved to another place, that's more adequate. Availability of supplies. Abby, you want to kind of touch on your logistical side here?
So as John was saying, when we go in like for our workshop or whenever we take supplies in, it's a pretty tedious process to get them in there, especially when we're bringing in some pretty high ticket items like markers and tape. And some of the men have kind of explained to us what the roll of tape or what a Sharpie could be worth if they were to take it outside of the classroom. So getting supplies in, and then of course you saw those posters. So they need a lot of markers and they need a lot of poster board, and just coordinating with the facility to make sure not only that we get those supplies to our peer educators, and then that the peer educators can get access to those supplies to create their posters and prepare for their presentations.
And then, the other facility is a contracted healthcare provider, and we're not here to we're not trying to rag on Wexford, which is the contracted healthcare provider here in Indiana. Not to say that they are opposing us or anything like that, but sometimes communicating with them and updating procedures, because, we'll have our own peer educators as well as the people they're educating take the class. And we preach over and over again, get tested, get tested, get tested. Well, these tests cost Wexford money. And they are like, why do you want to get tested? And the guy's sitting there and was like, well, because I just got a tattoo, a couple months ago, or I had sex not too long ago, or these kind of things. But if they admit that, they're going to get violated, right? Or get that write-up. And so, we've been negotiating back and forth, unfortunately, with the sponsorship of Dr. Doss, who's the chief medical officer for DOC here in Indiana, that, just taking the INPEP class can be justification to get tested. And they don't need to go any further into that. And we were, again, that was a beautiful thing that was almost complete when COVID hit. And of course, Dr. Doss and the whole medical system in DOC became very focused on containing any outbreaks, those kind of things. Our successes. Abby, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, so of course there's challenges, but we have had some incredible successes during our time with the program. Here you'll see Correctional Industrial Facility. So this was the first facility that we launched INPEP in. We did our first training in May of 2019, and we're about to go in and do our second training right before literally, like, I think the week that everything shut down, we were scheduled to be in there. But of course we can't take or give total credit to our peer educators for this, but they have had 0 cases in their facility of COVID-19. So with a population of nearly 1,500 people, they've had no cases. And we believe that to be in part due to our peer educators. This team is actually responsible for training nearly 1,000 people have taken their 10-hour workshop. So they really have almost saturated their facility with the training. And as we've said, things like washing your hands and how germs spread are a big focus. And so we believe that they're not only the training that they've given, but then also the accountability that they've established among the people in the facility around these topics has really helped to keep this number at 0. And I believe I looked yesterday, it's definitely still at 0, and I believe that's only one of 3 facilities maybe in Indiana that have had no cases. So definitely giving some of our credit to our peer educators on that. And even our liaison that John was talking about earlier, she said herself that she's seen people act differently, and she's giving credit to her team as well. We're very proud of that.
Yeah. This sort of dovetails what Abby was just talking about. 5 40-hour workshops we did in the last, between May and March of this year. 64 peer educators trained and over 1,000 students educated. That number is growing and continues to grow. So we're probably edging up on 1,500 at this point, which in a little over a year, about a year and 4 months, and in the midst of a global pandemic, is really incredible work by our peer educators. So we're very, very proud of them. And then finally, and this is something that I'll jump on, and then I'm sure Abby has something to add. One of the coolest parts of this program, I think the way that New Mexico kind of taught us to do it, and the way that we've been able to kind of tailor it to our own skills and strengths and implement it, is to see from Monday morning to Thursday morning the change that occurs. So Monday morning, people coming in, they're unsure about what we've met all of them because we've selected them, but they don't know what it's about. They don't know what's going on. They're coming in with sort of that prison mentality. And then, you know, we are upbeat and we're respectful and we're friendly and we're you know, very committed to bringing out their skills and abilities. We believe in them. We you know, understand they have a sense of purpose. But then Thursday morning, they have to present a 2-minute elevator speech on why they deserve to be a peer educator, or why they want to be a peer educator. And so it has to be brief and it has to be compelling. And every Thursday of those 5 trainings we've had, I'm sitting in the back of the room like crying my thing, because to see the peer educators just blossom in the care and the love and the compassion and the things that they show. And this is a word cloud of sentences taken from the peer educator elevator speeches at Indian Women's Prison. And you can see this, and I just want to highlight, because I have to, you see a line there in the middle, in the dark, I want the chance to be the light. And that makes me choke up right now, because I know after conversations with the peer who said that, she has had a terribly traumatic life. She's had, you know, so many things happen. Her situation right now is so dire. And yet, so when she came in, she was very like borderline hostile. And then for her to stand up there and say that, and she means it, she's still very, very committed, you know, like over a year later to this work, is just so beautiful. Abby, do you want to jump in or?
Yeah, I definitely echo everything that he says. That is by far, I think, one of the most meaningful parts of the training for us. And I think it really, we encourage our peer educators to write this down, write down what their speech is, so that when things get hard, when they're having those challenges that we discussed, they can refer back to them. I give this word cloud, or create these for each facility, and they have them posted as a reminder, like, okay, today we're having trouble with the count letter, but I was going to change the stereotypes. I was going to do something positive with my time here. Those little reminders that really keep people motivated to keep going. So I'm going to finish this up with a little soundbite from Laura. She is a peer educator at Indiana Women's Prison, and she's going to talk a little bit more about this.
Okay, hi, I'm Laura, and I'm from IWP. And the reason that I find this so essential is because it's giving us opportunities for hope. It's allowing us to have safe, non-judgmental space to talk about our health. We're having different options. It's a great space to be positive, and it's really giving us better employability skills. It's breaking down stereotypes, like that the men said, and it's giving us something to fill us with confidence. And we are just so excited to have that opportunity, and it's making our environment safer, and that's what we're interested in. So thank you.
Yeah, so I just think that she does a great job kind of summing up what we're saying, and truly our peer educators are the success of this program. There's all the other things that come with it, but we're so proud of them and the work that they're doing. And as John said, we treat them as our colleagues, and they are truly incredible, and we're so proud of them.
So with that, we will I'll stop yapping. As Abby said at the beginning, we could talk about this for hours. Some of my friends and family have endured that, and I'm very appreciative of them. So, but I will no longer inflict that upon you all. And Megan, we look forward to some questions.
Well, what an amazing program. John and Abby, we really appreciate what you've shared today with us, as well as the great work you're doing in Indiana. It's so impressive. I do want to remind folks to type their questions into the Q&A box. And while we're waiting on that, I have a question from Adam, who asks, how do you go about getting facility staff on board and buying into this program?
Yeah, so that was a little bit of a struggle. Our first tack was to go through the medical office. The former chief medical officer for DOC was named in the lawsuit that Abby referenced earlier, and so he was a bit distracted, and there was some roadblocks there. Then eventually we got a hold of somebody else, one of the deputy director of DOC, who's in charge of programming and reentry, and she became a huge ally. We went from having to bend over backwards to get a meeting with the medical officer to we had 5 minutes with her. She's like, "Sounds great. How can I help? What can I do?" and she suggested which wardens. So each facility in Indiana is run by a warden, and they are like kings and queens in their castle. They have a lot of authority within that facility and don't have to necessarily be uniform. There's obviously safety regulations and things like that have to be complied with, but they can dictate programming and things like that. And so she recommended a couple of wardens who we then presented to, and thanks to our friends in New Mexico, we're allowed to have some wardens from New Mexico speak to the Indiana wardens over Zoom to allay some of their things and get that buy-in, right? So that the New Mexico DOC is very much a fan of the peer education program. It's been around so long, they've seen the success. And so I think that having New Mexico DOC folks talk to Indiana DOC folks really helped as well. And then the buy-in of our liaisons happened really when they got to see us in action during the 40-hour training. And I know that our first facility, which is Correctional Industrial Facility, I'm going to go ahead and shout her out. Miss Yancey, she's our liaison there. She's wonderful. When we first met her, we were like, ooh, boy, like she might be tough. And then by the end, she's the biggest believer you could find, and she does anything for us. But she even said, she's like, when I was assigned, voluntold basically to be the liaison at this facility, I wasn't real sure what it was about. And she's like, this is important, and I'm really proud to be part of it. And so I think part of it is working the politics and kind of getting your foot in the door. Then the other is just kind of like letting them see us shine. Like we'll prove it to you. Abby, did you have anything to add? Sorry.
Yeah, I would just add to that second piece of that. Like once people kind of hear about the program, they get pretty bought in. So we've allowed some of the wardens to be on our TeleECHO sessions where they see the professionalism that is our peer educators. And then the graduation at the end of the 40-hour workshop, we invite our peer educators to invite COs, to invite the wardens, deputy wardens. So when the staff does have the opportunity to come, they do a brief presentation. The peer educators do a 5-minute presentation, or 20-minute. Man, it's been a while. 20-minute presentation. But I think that really starts to sell what they're doing and how high of a standard they're held to, and how they really have taken ownership and pride in the possible reach of the program.
Great, and I do have a follow-up question in terms of how do you recruit then the peer educators and get them to buy in?
Abby, you want to start?
Yeah, so we have up to now, we've really relied a lot on those liaisons and on the facility. We have a couple of kind of qualifications that we look for. We want our peer educators, of course, to be in good standards. So we ask that they don't have a write-up within the last year, but that has not disqualified people in the past. We do an interview process, so we just allow people to talk about that with us and kind of address any concerns there. But we do want people to be role models in this role, so it's important that we have that base covered. And then we also look that people have at least a year left on their time. We invest a lot in our peer educators. John was talking about the camaraderie of the team. So when people are coming and going and trying to work together as a team, which still happens, we just try to mitigate that by ensuring that people have time left in the facility, that they're dedicated to doing this as a job. And also some people are interested because it is a job. We're fortunate in that DOC has been able to pay our peer educators salary for the hours that they work. And I think when we first go into facilities, it can be a little difficult to recruit because people don't really understand what the program is. But in the facilities that we've returned to or that have the program already established, it's pretty easy to find people that want to be peer educators. We, one, rely on the peer educators that are already there to kind of line up some potential good candidates. And then also people understand that there is some privilege that comes with the program, there's responsibility, and there's a purpose in the work that you're doing, which a lot of people may be lacking during their time in DOC. So I think those are some of the ways that we recruit people. You want to add anything, John?
No, you nailed it. Thank you.
Well, I personally just want to echo, and pun intended there, one of your previous slides that said prison health is public health. And I just love that. I think it's so fitting. And I think this education program provides such a wonderful opportunity to improve the health of the people who are incarcerated, but also the communities once they return home. So I am curious, I know that this is such a new program, but do you plan to collect any data of those who've entered the program and then are released? And if so, like, what does that data look like?
Yeah, we're actually in the process of doing that right now. We're meeting with an evaluator. We're designing an instrument. Because we've trained 60 some peer educators at this point, and that's a pretty small N for any type of kind of quantitative information. So we think that the more effective research would be to measure sort of knowledge and attitudes, more or less, of people who are completing the 10-hour workshop, so the people that our peers are educating. And so we are working on an instrument right now to sort of accurately look at, sort of what is the knowledge base of that person, and what are some of the beliefs that person has regarding health. And at the end of the 10-hour workshop, is there any change there? And, that could provide a much larger, already in a year, or less than a year and a half, we've trained close to 1,500 people. So, or educated, I should say, that our peers have. So we're really looking at that more so as sort of a marker of what health outcomes might be from this intervention.
Great. One of the things I do want to add is Jody wanted to let you know that the word cloud you provided was really inspiring. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Happy to go back to it. Yeah. This was my screen, my wallpaper for a while on my computer. Yeah, it's incredible. So yeah, you're welcome, Jody.
Well, it looks like we don't have any further questions at this time. But again, thank you both for being here and presenting to us today, and for also sharing your emails. So folks, if they have any other questions, can write those down. This is a wonderful presentation, and I just want to remind folks to join us tomorrow at noon when we talk about racism as a public health issue. But again, thank you for being here. We really appreciate it, and I hope everyone has a really good rest of your week.